I've always loved Keith Richards' mini custom-made 5-string guitars, and I've never seen them all documented in one video. You kind of have to search all over the place for them. So I'm starting a new playlist on the channel called Legendary Guitars, where I'll do a deep dive on some of my favorite guitarists' most iconic guitars. And in this case, Keith had an assortment of guitars built for him by Ted Newman Jones, Tony Zemaitis, and Travis Bean between 1973 and 1981. So I'm going to show you a quick run through of the guitars I'm going to cover in case you want to skip around. And I hate asking this, but what the hell, please subscribe if you enjoy any of these videos. All you gotta do is press the button, and it's free, and it helps me immensely and is much appreciated. Okay, here we go. First one is the Ted Newman Jones Custom Model Number One, then the Ted Newman Jones Custom Model 2, the Zemaitis Custom 5-string called Macabre, or sometimes called the Zemaitis Pirate guitar, Ted Newman Jones Custom 6-string, no, it's not a 5-string, but then the Ted Newman Jones Telly, Ted Newman Jones Custom Number 3, Ted Newman Jones Keith Richards model, Travis Bean 5-string, and a Ted Newman Jones Shector Rosewood Telly. Ted Newman Jones was a luthier that has a very interesting backstory that involved Keith Richards from 1971 to the mid-80s. He would go from being an 18-year-old kid who rebuilt a Rickenbacker and sold it to Keith, to a personal guitar curator for Keith, and then went on the road with the Stones as arguably the world's first guitar tech for a major rock band, until he would open up his own shop designing and building custom guitars for Keith and an assortment of other legends like Tom Petty, Bob Dylan, and Ronnie Wood. In 1970, Eric Clapton would buy 6 50 Strats from Nashville and gift one each to George Harrison, Pete Townsend, and Steve Winwood. Ted Newman Jones would then take the best parts from the remaining 3 and assemble Blackie for Clapton. His story with Richards starts in 1969 when he is invited to a Stones show by Stanley Booth, who was on tour with the band working on his book, The True Adventures of the Rolling Stones. The 3 of them talk about guitars, and Keith tells Jones to stay in touch. Around that time, he found an old Rickenbacker solid body guitar in a pawn shop, worked on it, and refinished it in black. In 1971, he decides that he's going to use this guitar to reconnect with Richards, who's in the south of France at Nelcote, working on Exile on Main Street. So he goes to stay with a girlfriend in Paris, and once again, through Stanley Booth, he gets in touch with the Stones office and eventually gets invited by Keith to bring the guitar over for him to check out. The exact model of the Rickenbacker is shrouded in mystery. There are no known photos and even less details. At the end of this video, I'm going to dig further into what model I think it was, but for now I'm going to say it was a Rickenbacker 450. Anyway, Keith ends up buying it for $400. This is also the beginning of getting Jones acquainted with Keith's 5-string open G tuning. Jones said, "I had tuned the guitar to open E I'd been using to learn Brown Sugar, but Keith said it's an open G, an old blues tuning, and I take the bottom string off." And he started showing me how to play the song. There they part ways, and Jones moves to Spain to try to learn from luthiers there. Fast forward to December, there's a heist at Nelcote, and Keith has a bunch of guitars stolen. He ends up calling Jones and asking him if he will help start building his collection back, and sends him money to go to Gruhn's Guitars in Nashville. After that, he is beckoned by Keith to come to LA, where they are mixing songs at Sunset Sound, to start working on his guitars. It was in that period that he designed and built Keith's first custom guitar. He would then go on tour with Keith as his guitar tech, tuning his multiple guitars used during a set and working on them between shows. He would continue to build Keith custom guitars, and in 1977, Keith gave him $20,000 to set up a shop in Austin, Texas called Newman Guitars. Then in 1981, Jones decided to take a break from the road and focus on building guitars, so that was the end of his stint as Keith's guitar tech.
So I started off by using ordinary guitars and just taking the bottom string off, which is alright, it works fine like that, except that a guy working with us who looks after the guitars, a young cowboy called Newman Jones, and we got talking and we decided to try and make one up, you know, and he's made a couple for me since then that are really 5-string guitars with everything made especially for 5 strings, you know, and it makes it easier to play slightly.
In 1972, Jones began working on his first custom guitar for Richards. This would be the first of several 5-string custom guitars that he would build for him, and the guitar's body shape was similar to a smaller Gibson non-reverse Firebird. The body was solid mahogany with a laminated rosewood top. It had a bolt-on maple neck with a dot inlaid rosewood fingerboard with only 19 frets. The headstock had 2 gold Schaller tuners on the top side and 3 on the underside. For pickups, the guitar featured a black soap bar P90 in the neck position, and in the bridge a gold-plated Gibson humbucker with black surround ring. The bridge was a chrome-plated Leo Kwan Badass bridge with individually adjustable saddles. There was a black 3-ply plastic control plate on the lower right bout of the guitar, where gold-plated volume and tone knobs and an input jack were mounted. A 3-way toggle switch was mounted in the upper left bout on another small black 3-ply rectangular plastic plate. This guitar was tuned to Keith's 5-string open G tuning with no low D string. Keith would use this guitar extensively on the Pacific tour of '73 and on the next tour that fall. There's almost no information about this guitar in the Rolling Stones Gearbook, except that it is almost identical to the Ted Newman Jones Custom Number One, except for a few differences that I will cover. Luckily, this guitar was put up at the Rolling Stones exhibition and photographed extensively by, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, but if anyone's ever been on IORR.org, It's Only Rock and Roll Stones forum, this guy Mathis is always posting accurate and clutch information, so thank you to you if you see this. I also have this quote from Ted Newman Jones, which incorrectly places the positions of the pickups, by the way. Keith had drawn a design on a little piece of paper. It was 2 ellipses, one smaller than the other for the upper bout. I thought, what if I slanted the ellipses at an angle? And that was the first Newman shape. I had some 1-inch cherry wood that I used for the body and faced it with some Brazilian rosewood from xylophone keys that Erickson had given me. I had them run through a table saw so they were 5/16 inch thick, then glued them on. It was kind of a thin body, but the woods were so dense it didn't matter. Keith's drawing had a Birdland neck pickup, but I couldn't find one, so I put a humbucker there and an old P90 at the bridge. Apparently the humbucker howled with feedback, so Richard sent a PAF from a 3-pickup Les Paul Custom. The Les Paul Custom used extensively by Keith in '70 and '71 was stolen at Nelcote. Later, Steve Marriott purchased it, and the middle PAF was missing, so all signs point to it being that one. The differences from the first model are the body made from cherry wood instead of a solid piece of mahogany, and the first one being topped with laminated rosewood. This one was strips of rosewood from xylophone keys. This one had gold Grover tuners instead of Schallers and had decals from a Luftwaffe model kit on the body and headstock. Instead of the Leo Kwan Badass bridge, there is a strip of wood with Gibson 2 pneumatic saddles on it. Also, it looks like the volume and tone knobs are different. The crudeness of the build of this one and that quote from Jones leads me to believe that this guitar might have been made before the Ted Newman Jones Number One, but it could be a case of Jones' memory conflating the 2 builds, and I'm sure they were built not too far apart from each other. And even if that was true, Keith is seen playing the other one first at the Nicaragua earthquake benefit at the Forum in Inglewood, California on January 18th. And then this one makes its first appearance on the UK Europe tour of '73, starting September 1st in Vienna. Richards favored this one during that tour. But also, something to note, although he favored this one during the tour, when the band started cutting tracks for It's Only Rock and Roll at Musicland Studios in Munich, Keith went back to using the Custom Number One. And I would think probably because it stayed in tune better after looking closely at that crude bridge on this one. In April of 1975, the Stones announced that they would be doing an upcoming tour of North and South America in the coming summer months. A new member of the band, Ronnie Wood, had a custom guitar built for Keith by luthier Tony Zemaitis and gave it to Keith as a gift. Woody had already had a few Zemaitises that he had been using in the Faces, a pearl front, disc front, and metal front guitar. Keith's custom 5-string Zemaitis had a metal plate on the back that was inscribed, "To Keith Richards from Woody." It is known as the Zemaitis Pirate Guitar or Macabre, not to be confused with Keith's '54 Blackguard Telly, later nicknamed Macabre in the '80s, that was given to Keith by Eric Clapton. Macabre was made from solid mahogany with a single cutaway similar to a Les Paul shape. It had a skull and dagger inlaid into its top. It had a mahogany set neck with a bound ebony fingerboard, 24 frets, dot inlays, and a bound headstock with an engraved truss rod cover and a metal engraved dragon on the headstock. It featured 2 Schaller tuners on the top side and 3 on the underside. It was equipped with a single humbucker with a black pickup ring closer to the bridge position and a volume and a tone knob. It featured a hand-built Zemaitis 5-string bridge and tailpiece. This was another one of Keith's favorite 5 strings, always tuned to open G. Sadly, it would perish along with the Newman Jones Custom Number One and a 5-string Martin that Newman Jones converted at a fire that burned Keith's rental Laurel Canyon house to the ground. During the Stones' 2005 to 2006 Bigger Bang tour, Keith was given a Japanese-made replica of the Zemaitis 5-string Macabre guitar built by Kanda Shokai. So yes, I know this isn't a 5-string, but it needs to be covered because a 5-string Keith Richards model will eventually evolve from it. I've had to piece together fragments of information from interviews about all the different custom guitars that Newman Jones built Keith, and this is where it starts to get a little hazy. A few of these were never used live and never photographed, so we will just have to use our imagination, and hopefully some photos will turn up. So the next guitar that Jones built for Richards was a neck-through. Says Jones, "I did a few with cutaways that varied slightly until we had what we were looking for. Other builds employed mahogany and spruce parts, different pickups, and a slightly tweaked body shape. For one, I cut a cherry body and gave it a maple face and maple neck with ebony fingerboard," said Jones. It was the first guitar on which he put all 5 tuning keys on one side of the headstock. In '74, he personally delivered the guitar to Richards in Geneva, Switzerland. There's no picture of this guitar that I've found, but the same 5-in-a-line headstock design would be employed on Keith's signature model that I will cover later on, and on future Newman's made post-1979. Here's an example known as the Woodpecker guitar that Jones was custom making for Woody in 1981, and it never saw the light of day.
I remember Keith had a guitar that he used that was also a prototype, and it was hand-built by Ted Newman Jones, Keith's guitar tech at the time. That was also stolen as well, so it's quite a collection of guitars that are no longer within traceable sight.
According to Newman Guitar's comment on this video, the prototype Woody is talking about being stolen was used on his 1974 solo record. Could it be this guitar referenced in this quote from Jones about which of his custom guitars did Keith still have in his collection? Said Jones, "The 1 or 2 that burned up or something I'm not sure of, 1 5-string electric and 1 5-string acoustic. Then I made Keith a walnut 5-string. I haven't seen that one since, so I don't know what happened to it. The next to last one I made him was Paddock. It's kind of a redwood from Burma." The last one that he's talking about I'll cover in this video, but I'm thinking the prototype that was stolen was the walnut 5-string he was talking about. In 1977, Keith would join Mick Taylor and Mick Jagger at sessions for an album that evolved from a movie soundtrack project. The album was eventually scrapped, with the Stones moving on to work on Some Girls. Before those sessions, Keith used one of his new Ted Newman Jones 6-strings that he had been given. He was pictured with one of these in '78 next to a Mesa Boogie Mark I, said Keith at the time. He has been making a fair amount of them. In fact, he brought 2 to me recently. One was supposed to be for Mick, but I got to him first and paid for it. Too bad, Mick. Every time he brings these guitars, they keep getting better and better. The neck he's making now, instead of just having a truss rod through the middle, is almost like a Travis Bean guitar with that aluminum neck, except that it's slightly smaller and the aluminum is encased in maple. So you've got the strength of a steel neck, but without actually touching cold steel when you're playing. There are 2 pickups. Ted tends to use Fender Telecaster pickups for the treble position and a Gibson humbucker for the bass. Soon after, Jones began working with Rob Turner, founder of EMG, whose pickups became standard equipment in Ted Newman Jones guitars, in part because Turner would build them specifically for Richard's 5-strings. Alright, here's one that could have been in the last section of prototypes, but this one has a little bit more information that I've pieced together, thanks again to the IORR.org Stones forum. So this one to me looks like an earlier Ted Newman Jones prototype, but the date it was built is unknown. But the date we do have is from the person who now owns this guitar, which he won in a contest, which I'm about to get into. So you can pause the screen and read this whole story if you want, but basically a radio station was doing a promotion in 1986 for the Stones' new album Dirty Work, and this guitar was given to caller number 1. He called in and won the album and a t-shirt, and then a month or 2 later he went to the radio station and was presented this guitar by Keith. It is signed To Sean Do the Harlem Shuffle, Keith Richards, and Harlem Shuffle is in reference to the first single off of Dirty Work. So now about the guitar. It's a 5-string. The G-string tuner comes through the middle of the headstock. Keith played the guitar and wrote down how to tune to open G on what looks like a piece of a Marlboro box, or it could just be a piece of paper. Either way, very awesome. The guitar has what looks like a Leo Kwan Badass bridge, a Bill Lawrence hot rail type telly pickup in the bridge, and an uncovered Seymour Duncan telly pickup in the neck. It has 2 volume knobs and 2 tone knobs on the bottom right bout, with an input jack and a 3-way selector switch. And then up on the top left bout is a Veritone switch, which is confirmed by the winner. And now, going only off of speculation, it looks to me like it's an earlier prototype that was given to Keith and that he never used. And I would guess somewhere between 1974 and 1976. I say that because of the use of the Leo Kwan Badass Bridge, which was on Keith's first Ted Newman Jones custom model. And then also this is pre-Ted Newman Jones' use of EMG pickups, which he became exclusive with. And EMG became a company in 1976. And then also when Ted Newman Jones created Newman guitars in 1977, that's when he started using the 5 tuners in a line design. And this still has the 3 on a side type headstock, but obviously with 2 on a side and 1 in the middle. In 1978, the videos for Miss You and Faraway Eyes featured Keith playing a new Telecaster. This was a Ted Newman Jones customized telly in which he made a copy of the Telecaster body out of natural mahogany and paired it with a neck from a Fender Rosewood Telecaster. Jones said this 6-string that he put together for Keith was a copy of a Fender telly with the Fender Telecaster electronics. I had a beautiful piece of mahogany and a beautiful Fender Rosewood neck that just seemed to want to be together. This guitar would be used for a few years and then modified in 1981, which I will cover later in this video. This is the Ted Newman Jones 5-string Keith Richard model prototype that was made in 1979. It would be the first in a series of Keith Richard models that Jones would build for Keith. This was the prototype for the future production model. This blueprint dated 1980 is for the production model of the guitar. It was built with a 1 5/8 inch thick Babiuk body and a bird's eye maple top. The neck was also Babiuk with a maple fingerboard with 24 frets. It had 2 black EMG humbucking pickups with a preamp powered by a 9-volt battery. It featured a volume and tone control with a 3-way selector switch, 5 Schaller tuning pegs, and a Ted Newman Jones stainless steel adjustable bridge. Jones had plans at the beginning to make 100 of them a year, but only a few have ever surfaced in the used guitar market. Keith would tour with this guitar in 1979 with the New Barbarians. Also on the New Barbarians tour, Keith would unveil a new custom-made Travis Bean 5-string. It was similar to a Travis Bean standard model with a body made from koa wood and standard Travis Bean humbuckers. Featured an aluminum neck with a 5-string headstock configuration, having 2 tuning pegs on the top side and 3 on the underside. It also featured a Bean-made adjustable bridge. On the back of the aluminum neck, where it is bolted to the body, has the following etched in: 15 May 79 for Keith Richard, Travis Bean. The one-piece solid aluminum neck was crucial in allowing the strings to vibrate as long as physics would allow, by forming a solid metal link between both ends of the strings, in theory not robbing the strings of precious motion and soaking up their vibration. Keith was already familiar with Travis Bean guitars, as he used a couple of 6 strings and a bass in 1975, which I will show you because they are awesome. The TB1000 standard model had a flat body with a dot inlaid rosewood fingerboard. The TB1000 Artist had a Hawaiian koa body with a carved top and block inlays on an ebony fingerboard. Both models featured volume and tone knobs for each pickup and a 3-way selector switch. They each had 22 frets and the unique headstock with an open T in the center with 3 on a side chrome Schaller tuners. The TB2000 bass had a slightly different shaped body made from koa with 20 frets, 2 bass pickups wired with volume and tone knobs for each, and a 3-way toggle switch. The Ted Newman Jones Rosewood Telecaster that Keith used on the 1978 Some Girls tour suffered technical failures and would essentially be turned into 2 different tellies. One we call the Some Girls Telly, transforming from the one Keith is holding on the right to the one pictured on the left, and the new telly that we will call the Ted Newman Jones Shector Rosewood Telly. The story goes that in 1981, after Newman Jones retired from going on the road as Keith's guitar tech, Alan Rogan, who was guitar tech for The Who, stepped in as new guitar tech for the Tattoo You tour. Since the electronics on the Some Girls Telly failed and needed to be replaced, Alan Rogan had David Shector of Shector Guitar Research build a new Telecaster body made of rosewood and took the Fender rosewood neck from the Some Girls Telly and paired them together for Keith to use on the tour. This new all-rosewood Telecaster left the original Ted Newman Jones Some Girls Telly body without a home or a neck, so Shector fixed it up by pairing it with a Fender maple neck with rosewood board and a new Telecaster bridge. Notice that the pickups have also been replaced, with the neck pickup now an uncovered Seymour Duncan instead of the lipstick covered Telly pickup of the original. It looks like the tuners have been changed as well. It was eventually sold to a radio station exec and signed by Keith to Doc, Love and Prescriptions, Keith Richards. The new Ted Newman Jones Shector Hybrid Rosewood Telecaster was among those used by Keith on the Tattoo You tour in 1981. Alan Rogan explained, "The solid rosewood neck on that guitar was from an original Rosewood Telecaster. When I first saw the neck, it was on a non-Fender body, and the bridge was in the wrong place. I got Shector to make a solid rosewood body, and I put it all together with a set of Seymour Duncan pickups, which Keith liked a lot. It had a great sound." Alright, so now back to the Rickenbacker that I teased at the beginning of the video. We know that Newman Jones found an old Rickenbacker and rebuilt it, painted it black, and then sold it to Keith to start out their long relationship working together. What I really want to know is what model that Rickenbacker was. There's not much information clarifying, and from what I've found, there's only 2 quotes to go off of, one from Ted Newman Jones and one from Mick Taylor. So I'm going to jump down the rabbit hole a little bit to see if I can narrow it down. To start out, there's only one source on the internet that I found that states what model the Rickenbacker was. This is from the Unique Guitar blog, who wrote a good article about the history of Ted Newman Jones, and he states that it was a 1965 Rickenbacker Model 450. Here's quote number 1 from Ted Newman Jones in the Rolling Stones Gearbook. Just about the first guitar I ever rebuilt was an old Rickenbacker, and I've never seen one like it since. I don't know the number, but I'd know it by the shape anytime. It was a solid body and didn't seem to be a real popular model. The next quote from Mick Taylor narrows it down a little bit more. I played slide on a black Rickenbacker 6-string with gold-plated pickups on all down the line. So we know it is a solid body, and other than the Rickenbacker frying pan lap steel, here are all of their solid bodies. Starting with the Combo 400, originally from 56 to 57, they had a distinctive tulip-shaped body. We know it had 2 pickups, so since the Combo 400 was a single pickup model, it couldn't have been that. The Combo 450 had 2 pickups, so that's an option. Then in 1958, the body shape changed from the tulip shape to a cresting wave shape. Following the same logic, it couldn't have been a Model 420 or 425, which were both single pickup models. It would have been the 450 again. Also, the Model 950 could fit as the 2 pickup variant of the Model 900, but they make no mention of it being a 3/4 size, so count that one out. So we are down to an earlier tulip 450 or the later cresting wave 450 from the 400 series. What's hanging me up is Mick Taylor saying the pickups were gold plated. As far as I know, all of the pickups in these models were silver single pickups or toaster pickups, so Ted Newman Jones must have put new pickups in that were gold plated. Ted Newman Jones saying that it wasn't a popular model is making me question it being a cresting wave Model 450 though, since George Harrison very famously used a Rick 425 that he would later add another pickup to, essentially making it a Model 450 minus the extra volume and tone knobs. This guitar sold at auction for $657,000. This is making me lean towards the mystery model being a Rick 450 but of the tulip shaped variant. One final clue being, when Keith was handed this guitar by Jones, he said, "I've never seen one quite like this. You did a good job with it." Surely he had seen George's cresting wave 450. But what do I know? Keith and Ted Newman Jones could have both been unaware of George's use of that guitar. I would love to know if anyone has any more information regarding what model this Rick was though. Unfortunately, we may never know because it was among the guitars that were stolen during the heist at Keith's house in Nell Code in 1971 during the recording of Exile on Main Street. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please hit the subscribe button and check out more of my videos. Thank you.